Obtaining air superiority has been a primary objective for the belligerents since the Second World War. Russia has yet to acquire air superiority, let alone air supremacy, as the war against Ukraine approaches its fourth week. What does it mean to have an advantage in the air? What is the significance of this? Why hasn't Russia gotten there yet? Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we'll figure out why Russia is incapable of air superiority in Ukraine. We're trying to figure out why this isn't the case. Before we get into the video, don't forget to drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Make sure that the post notifications are turned on so that you never miss a video from us. Without further ado, let's dive in. In a fiery speech to the US Congress, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy demanded a no-fly zone, as well as more fighter jets and anti-aircraft weapons. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has been going on for more than 3 weeks, and military analysts are baffled by the paucity of the Air Force used by the Russian Aerospace Forces, VKS. While Russian troops and tanks outnumber Ukrainians on the ground, the VKS should have focused on and destroyed the Ukrainian Air Force early in the battle to gain what's known as air superiority. Air superiority refers to the belligerent who has complete control of the sky during a war. Furthermore, the US Department of Defense and NATO define air supremacy as opposed to air superiority as when the opposing air force is incapable of effective intervention by a belligerent. As a result, air superiority allows air operations to be carried out without prohibitive interference by the opposing force, whereas air supremacy makes the opposing air force incapable of effective interference, according to NATO definitions. Experts believe that obtaining air superiority has been a major concern for warring states in most military engagements since the Second World War. To accomplish this, the belligerent must completely destroy the enemy's air force. This can be accomplished via its own air force or land-based air defense system. As a result, when Zelenskyy asks the US and NATO partners to impose and enforce a no-fly zone over Ukraine, he's effectively asking them to deny Russia any opportunity of controlling the skies. The essential benefit of air superiority is that it allows ground troops to operate freely and safely. In his essay, The True Worth of Air Power, Robert Pape, a security affairs professor who specializes in air power, focuses on this. He claims that a belligerent superior air force, along with infantry, can provide a decisive edge over the enemy. Pape states that attacking the enemy simultaneously by air and on the ground puts the opposing army in a predicament when discussing the need for better aerial bombing accuracy. This predicament is caused by two factors. If the enemy's ground forces are concentrated in large numbers, aircraft attacks can quickly wipe them out. However, if they don't concentrate in huge numbers, the infantry can destroy them in detail, mopping them up with minimum losses, which is a concern. Now, where is Russia lacking? Or is it incapable of air superiority in Ukraine? Russia has yet to acquire air superiority, let alone air supremacy, as the war against Ukraine approaches its fourth week. One explanation could be that the VKS fighter fleets are being maintained in a reserve as a deterrent against NATO forces intervening directly. It's quite doubtful that this is the case. If the VKS is capable of large-scale combat operations to quickly achieve air superiority over Ukraine, failing to do so weakens rather than strengthens its prospective deterrent effect against NATO forces. The Russian army's failure to quickly overrun the much smaller and poorly positioned Ukrainian forces, as well as its huge losses of contemporary vehicles and personnel, has already severely harmed foreign perceptions of Russia's conventional military might. From the standpoint of NATO deterrence, the Russian General Staff and the Kremlin have every motivation to use their air power to the fullest extent possible in order to reclaim some of their lost credibility. In the early days of the invasion, when the Russian leadership was planning a swift military triumph, this was a potentially accurate premise. This theory no longer explains the lack of large-scale VKS strikes, as this potential is gone, and Russian troops have settled into a pattern of heavy artillery and cruise missile bombardments against many besieged cities, most notably Kharkiv and Mariupol. Hence, due to the relatively small proportion of the VKS fixed-wing fleet capable of employing precision-guided munitions, large-scale strikes with unguided bombs and rockets were avoided in order to avoid damaging critical infrastructure that Russia hopes to conquer and use, or to minimize Ukrainian civilian casualties. Although the initial inability of the VKS to establish air superiority could be explained by a lack of early warning, coordination capability, and sufficient planning time, the VKS's continued pattern of activity suggests a more serious conclusion. The VKS lacks the institutional capacity to plan, brief, and fly complex air operations at scale. Pilots in Western air forces such as the Royal Air Force and the United States Air Force are intensively educated to fly complex sorties in bad weather, at low altitudes, and against real and simulated ground and aerial threats. They must be able to do this consistently and strike targets within 5 to 10 seconds of the targeted time on target to pass advanced rapid jet training. Most VKS frontline training sorties, on the other hand, take place in a relatively sterile surrounding and involve simple duties like navigation flights, unguided weapon deliveries at open ranges, and target simulation flying in conjunction with a ground-based air defense system. Russia lacks a training and exercise infrastructure comparable to that used by NATO air forces, which train together on well-equipped ranges in the Mediterranean, North Sea, Canada, and the United States. Russia also lacks an equivalent to NATO countries' yearly large-scale sophisticated air exercises with realistic threat simulations, the most notable of which is Red Flag. As a result, it's not unexpected if the majority of Russian pilots lack the ability to fly efficiently as part of big, mixed formations undertaking complicated and dynamic missions while under fire. Furthermore, if the VKS was capable of executing complicated air operations, achieving air superiority over Ukraine should have been quite simple. Due to long-range Russian SAM systems, the tiny number of remaining Ukrainian fighters waging heroic air defense efforts over their own cities are forced to operate at low altitudes, resulting in very limited situational awareness and endurance. For the significantly more numerous, better armed, and more modern VKS fighters stationed along Ukraine's borders, they should be relatively easy to overcome. Russian helicopters and fast planes have been defeated by Ukrainian mobile medium and short-range SAM systems, such as the SA-11 and SA-15. Large Russian strike aircraft packages flying at medium or high altitudes with escorting fighters, on the other hand, would be able to locate and strike any Ukrainian SAMs that uncovered their position by shooting at them quickly. They'd lose aircraft in the process, but they'd be able to whittle away at the surviving SAMs and quickly gain air superiority. On paper, Russia should be more than capable of establishing air supremacy if it commits to combat operations in big, mixed formations to suppress and hunt down Ukrainian fighters and SAM systems. With this, we have come to the end. What do you think about the conflict between Ukraine and Russia? Do let us know in the comments section below. Subscribe for more content just like this one and share it with your friends. Also, don't forget to smash that like button and also press the bell icon to get notified about our new videos. Until then, fellas,